Ecclesiastes. But one of the things that I've really tried to pay attention to, and really I got a jolt about this when I was preparing for my teaching for Converge, when I taught on the Shema, Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh alone. And I realized that I had fought Trinitarians on that verse for so long that I really never took the time to just sit back and meditate about what it actually was saying. And when I did and realized that, wow, this is really a plead from God, where he wants to be my God. He wants to be your God. And he wants to be that God alone. He doesn't want to share us with, and we don't today, we don't have to worry about, idol gods like Baal and stuff like that. Instead, we have to worry about crystals and dream catchers and lucky charms and prayer hands and stuff and knock on wood. Oh, wait. God can't protect me, but if I call up a wood demon, that, by golly, that'll do it. I'll be protected now. It's like, yeah, so the devil is so sneaky. He knows that he'd never get away with trying to get us to accept a statue of Baal, but some little superstition thing that's going to protect us, well, that kind of slips in. And so we have to be really diligent. But it was such a powerful experience for me to realize that I needed to put away what it wasn't saying for me. Now, obviously, if you're arguing with a Trinitarian and help them to understand what the scripture's saying, then you've got to be able to deal with the arguments. But I'm not a Trinitarian, and I'm not arguing with myself. I just want to find out what the scripture's saying. And we're going to deal with that today as well. We're going to deal with that in Ecclesiastes, because there's some really cool stuff in Ecclesiastes about enjoying life. And it's interesting because I talk about divine appointments and God teeing things up. And yeah, I had a conversation earlier this week with a lady, and didn't even, it's like one of these conversations that just goes by in the ministry, and you don't really think anything of it. And then I was thinking about this teaching, and particularly because Bill Schlegel and I we translated in Ecclesiastes yesterday, and Bill made some statements that were just really profound and deep. And all of a sudden this conversation came back, and it was about, it was with a woman who was going to get to, and she was going to get something in her life that, well, it wasn't exactly on her bucket list. It was sort of on her bucket list, but she never thought she'd get it. And then when she was, when it looked like, wow, this is really going to happen, all of a sudden it's like, I can't believe this is going to happen. And it's like there was something inside her that was almost self-defeating, like I know something's going to go wrong before I get there, type of thing. And in Ecclesiastes, one of the things we're going to see tonight is that one of the repeated themes that God is going to say is that he wants us to enjoy life. And I think of the prophecies, Ellen, again, you're wonderful in your prophetic word, that God wants us to be comforted that he's given us all things. Well, it doesn't say he's going to give us all things. Like we've got to wait until the rapture, until we get a new body before we can enjoy life. But he's given us all things now. He says he's given us riches. And then he says he's kind and he's merciful and he's good and he's loving, and he repeated loving and merciful a couple different times, and that we should be at peace. And what does that mean? Well, I'm not at peace if I'm trying to enjoy life, but I'm feeling guilty about it. There's got to, and it's not that you need a lot of money or a lot of anything to enjoy life. Just kind of relax inside yourself, be at peace, be confident in your salvation, and enjoy it. Tonight I came home, Genevieve's working late. I came home, I had leftover chicken and I had eggs, but I'll tell you what, I sure like that chicken and those eggs. They were great. I just really enjoyed them. I put barbecue sauce on my eggs and I just had a grand old time. And I was at peace and I enjoyed it. And I didn't feel guilty about it. How can you feel guilty about eating leftovers and eggs? I mean, but seriously, um, it's just something we get through. So I'd like to start in Ecclesiastes chapter 8. And as we get into the state of the dead, I want to see if we can couch it a little differently, because as we enter chapter 9, we'll be getting into the state of the dead. And again, every time I've read these verses, I've kind of positioned my mind to make sure I can talk someone who believes that the dead are alive into understanding that the dead are dead. And these are good verses for doing that. But I don't need to talk myself into that. And the writer of Ecclesiastes did not, when the author of Ecclesiastes, God's the author, Solomon is the writer, when he penned these words, I have a feeling that he was not thinking, there, by golly, no one will ever believe the dead are alive now, because they didn't believe that then anyway. So if he wasn't fighting that, what was he saying? What's the point of those verses? And that's sort of how I want to edge into this. So let's see. He talks about let's see. Verse 12 of Ecclesiastes 8, though a sinner does evil 100 times and lives long, yet surely I know that it will be better for those who fear God, who are reverent before him. And what this is setting up is very simple. As it says in other places, don't envy the wicked. Don't envy, what they have or how they live. It's going to be better for the people who are righteous. Absolutely. And then verse 13 says, it will not be well with the wicked person. And then I love this illustration, nor will he lengthen his days like a shadow, because he does not fear God. And when I was 14, I got my first real job was working landscaping with Charles G. Malore Landscaping in Syracuse, New York. And we worked 10-hour days. And I can remember watching my shadow and going, yay, it's getting close to 5 o'clock. And that's the illustration that's here. The wicked person, he's not going to see his days grow long like we will, because he doesn't fear God. And so then in verse 14, the Ecclesiastes here bridges into a pointless thing. And so verse 14, he says, there's a pointless thing that's done on the earth. There are righteous people to whom it happens according to the work of the wicked. And when we think of the wicked, we think of God's justice, God's judgment, how the wicked are going to get what they deserve. And sometimes they don't. and instead they get what the righteous deserve. Actually, Jeremiah complained about this. If we want to go to Jeremiah chapter 12, Jeremiah 12, I talk about this quite often because I love the honesty. Remember that Hebrews says that we come boldly before the throne of grace. And I really don't like that translation. In fact, the REV doesn't read that way, because in America, frankly, we live in a very arrogant, self-assured, self-righteous culture. And when we think about coming boldly before God, we see God up on his throne and we're going to march right in there and tell God how it is. And of course, in the biblical culture, they would never think of that. You would end up as a French fry. God would just go, I'm tired of you. That's the end of that. So what's going on there? What's really happening in the text? Well, the Greek word is parahisia, and it doesn't mean boldness in the sense of what we think of an arrogant, aggressive boldness. It means frankness of speech. The reason it gets translated boldness is because in a biblical culture where if you spoke frankly and honestly to a superior, they could, throw that man in irons or fire him or do whatever, So it took boldness to speak frankly. But that's what the word parahisia really means. That what's Hebrews saying? Hebrews saying, here's God. First of all, you're not going to surprise him. You're not going to come to God with a problem and he's going to go, "Oh, you're kidding. I didn't know that." Of course he knows it. So, but what he wants us to do is to be really honest in our communication with him. And that's the essence of Hebrews, about come boldly, come honestly, openly, frankly before the throne of grace. And we see this modeled in the life of Jeremiah. So Jeremiah chapter 12, verse 1, "You are righteous, Yahweh, when I bring a case against you." And that literally is a case, a complaint, a lawsuit based on the Torah, the law of Moses, which said that if you did righteous, things would work out for you, and things weren't working out well in Jeremiah's life. "Yet I would speak to you about your justice. Why does the road of the wicked prosper? Why are all those who deal treacherously at ease?" And then Jeremiah goes on and says, he's confused by this. And here's Solomon, who predated Jeremiah by what, 940 to 580. So, over 300 years, certainly 350 years or so that Solomon wrote before Jeremiah. And here's verse 14, back to Ecclesiastes 8. "There's a pointless thing that's done on the earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the work of the wicked." Again, there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the work of the righteous. And I said, this is pointless, but it's really true. And what does it mean to us? Well, one thing it means is you may not get what you deserve here on earth. You will get it. What did he just say? He says it will be better in verse 12. It will be better for those who fear God, because God is seeing things. He is keeping score. He will repay the righteous, absolutely. But on earth, we can't get our expectations up like God owes us something or God's going to make everything go right, because it doesn't necessarily happen. And, there's... sadly, when people believe that God will reward them always for their righteousness, then when things don't go right in their life, they turn away from God, they lose their fire, they lose their heat. And really, if we have an honest perspective of God, then that won't happen, because this is life. Righteous people to whom it happens according to the work of the wicked, and wicked people to whom it happens according to the work of the righteous. And so what do you do in a situation like that? Verse 15, and now this is kind of a box, because we're going to see this again come up in chapter 9. So we'll hit it here, and then we'll hit it in chapter 9. He said, "So I recommended the enjoyment of life." And as Schlegel and I messed with this and translated this, it really is, there's a very strong case that the scholars make that the word recommended here is a superb translation. So we have to understand this is words coming from the mouth of God, if you will. I recommend the enjoyment of life, because a man has no better thing under the sun than to eat and to drink and to be merry, and that will accompany him in his labor all the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. And this is so totally different than the ascetic movement. There was throughout history, there have been periods of time where there have been a focus on asceticism, where there's been an overcurrent that God somehow doesn't, he doesn't, it's not that God, they would never, I don't know if they'd ever come right out and say God doesn't want you happy, but it's like somehow or other you're not holy enough, you're not godly enough, you're not pious enough, you're not serious enough if you're having a good time. I mean, maybe one of you guys could know this and help me out here, but I know there's a denomination that will not let you sing or hum or whistle on the Sabbath because it indicates you're having too good a time. If anybody knows about that denomination, I ran into it when I was teaching in Las Vegas one time, and now I can't remember the name of the denomination. But but really, I mean, you can't sing on the Sabbath. It's just an indication you're having a great time. Nobody should have a great time on the Sabbath. Are you kidding? We're supposed to be somber in the sight of God. But, let's read our Bibles. That's not what God says. You can just, I can just picture God on his throne up in heaven, and he kind of shouts down with his little megaphone, and he's looking at all of us people, and we're trying to be so serious in our worship of him and so cautious lest we should seem overly joyful. And God shouts down and goes, I recommend the enjoyment of life. I mean, that's really what he does. He created us and all these prophecies. I've given you all things. Well, thanks God, but you didn't mean us to enjoy them, did you? I've given you riches. Well, thanks God, but you didn't want me to spend them, did you? And so I love this. It's something we've got to burn in our hearts, because so many people have something inside them that when anything is really good is starting to happen to them, it's like there's like a short circuit. It's like a little voice that says, this can't be happening to you. This shouldn't be happening to you. You should feel guilty about this. Something goes wrong. And we short circuit ourselves. And yet here's God. I recommend the enjoyment of life. Why? Because life is short, life is unpredictable, and sometimes even if you do righteous things, you get what the wicked get. And sometimes you have to watch while the wicked who are doing wicked things get what you as a righteous person should have gotten. So what does God say? Look, take some time and enjoy life. You really just eat, drink, be merry, and if you're that way, that'll stay with you. And then of course, then the author here is, thinking about this, and he goes, verse 16, when I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the activity that's done on the earth. And I love this. Bill and I laughed about this because this is really cute. Because think about, what are your eyes looking at when you're asleep? Nothing, because they're closed. So he says, verse 16, when I applied my heart to know wisdom and see the activity that's done on the earth, indeed, there is one, there is a person that neither day nor night sees sleep with his eyes. He doesn't see any sleep. He's too busy, so he doesn't get to see sleep. He doesn't get to not see because he's asleep. But anyway, verse 17. Then I saw all the work of God, because, people are trying to figure this out. How's this work? How's life work? Man cannot find out the work that's done under the sun, because however much man labors to seek it out, he got 15 PhDs, doesn't make any difference. He will not find it. Even if a wise man thinks he can comprehend it, he will not be able to find it. Life is too crazy, too complex. And in Army lingo, the rules of engagement at the spiritual level are way beyond us. We just simply don't have access to all that information. Why can God sometimes intervene and other times he can't, and all that stuff? It just doesn't come together. So we go to Ecclesiastes chapter 9, and in chapter 9, for all this I laid to my heart, even to explore all this, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. And then it goes on. This is kind of an interesting phrase, so we got to get a grip on this. It says, people do not know whether it is love or hatred. Everything is ahead of them. And so you've got to remember, he's exploring all this, and he's trying to find out the works of God, and they're in the hand of God. And he says, people don't know whether it is love or hatred. And what it's talking about is what's coming. So in other words, people don't know from the context what's coming in their life. Is it going to be love? Is it going to be hatred? What's going to come upon them? Nobody knows. And that's why we have to take one day at a time. In verse 2, then he goes on, it's the same for everyone. There's one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good, to the clean, to the unclean, to him who sacrifices, to him who does not sacrifice, as is the good, so is the sinner, he who takes an oath, as he who is afraid to take an oath. So there's all these different kinds of people, but there's one event, and you and I know that one event is death. In verse 3, this is an evil in all that's done under the sun, that there's one event to everyone. And also the heart of the sons of men is full of evil, and madness is in their heart while they're alive. And after that, and I like the way the Hebrew text leaves out the verbs and stuff. You live, and after that, to the dead. You charge off to go to the dead. That's really what's going on here. To the dead. So, since there's this one event for everyone, no matter how much you live, then I'm back to God shouting down, I recommend the enjoyment of life. You don't know what's coming, whether it's going to be love or hatred. You don't know how long you're going to live. So basically, you're alive right now. Enjoy it. And if we really kind of burn that into our soul, then when we see something good happening to us, or we want to have something good, or we have an opportunity to do something good that we're blessed by, that we're excited by, and you start to notice that little thing that comes up that says, maybe you shouldn't do that, maybe you don't deserve that, maybe something's going to go wrong. We just have to learn to be in control and make that thing go away, because we're not going to really enjoy life if every time something comes up that we can enjoy, we start feeling guilty about it. And so he says in verse 4, for whoever is united with all the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. Absolutely, because if you're going to enjoy life, you've got to be living. Now, you may be just a living dog, but a living dog can enjoy a bone and a dead lion can't. So be thankful you're alive and enjoy what you've got. Verse 5, for the living know that they will die, but the dead don't know anything, nor do they have any more a wage, for even the memory of them is forgotten. Did I teach about this, about they don't have a wage anymore? I know I did teach about that. Okay, Tom, got it. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I thought I did. That's a really powerful verse and very important. So the dead don't know anything. They don't have a wage. Even the memory of them is forgotten. Verse 6, and their love and their hatred and their envy have already perished, and they don't have any more a portion forever in anything that's done under the sun. And so, yeah, we can use these verses and talk about, look, when you're dead, you're really genuinely dead. You're not alive. You're not a ghost, and that kind of thing. And these are important verses to teach that lesson. But that wasn't the primary thing that was in Solomon's mind when he penned this, and as God gave this revelation. Like I said earlier, it wasn't so that God's sitting up there in heaven going, yeah, now by golly, they'll know that the dead are dead and not alive. But really what he's pointing out is, look, I told you to enjoy life. Is there a problem here? We're all going to die, and a living dog is better than a dead lion, and the dead don't know anything, and they can't earn anything, and they don't have a portion in life. So you do. So grab onto life and enjoy it. That's really the punch here that God is getting at. And then he in verse 5, I want to repeat that again and do a slightly different emphasis. For they know the living know they will die, but the dead do not know anything, nor do they have any more a wage, for even the memory of them is forgotten. And that's really spooky if you live in the Jewish world, because in the Jewish world, the fact that people would remember you is a huge deal. You know, that's one of the reasons people wanted to have graves. They absolutely eschewed cremation because the body would disappear and then people would forget about you. So it was very important in the Jewish world that a dead person would be remembered. And that, by the way, is also why it was such a curse for, like when David fought Goliath, and Goliath said, you know, I'll give your body, your dead body, to the animals of the field and the birds of the air. You know, and in the case of Jezebel, you know, the dogs will eat Jezebel. And to you and I, you know, we're really focused on the resurrection. It doesn't matter whether we're cremated or buried, but to the Jew, the fact that you as a person would be forgotten was a huge problem, very scary. And so here Solomon is very honest, and he just says, look, you know, not only, you know, you better enjoy life now, because after you're dead, you can't enjoy your life. And frankly, even people are going to forget about you. So you better enjoy your life now. Verse 6, and their love and their hatred and their envy have already perished, and they don't have any more a portion forever in anything that's done under the sun. And so then once he's made that point, and I told you when we were back in chapter 8, verse 15, that God kind of made a box here. So here it comes up again. This is the other end of the box, if you will. Go, eat. And, you know, if you notice, if you're reading the REV, the word and is in italics. It's the reason we didn't want to do like go with an exclamation point is we didn't want people to misunderstand and think God was sending them away. God isn't sending you away. He's sending you to something. It's like God set up this feast. He set up life. There's food to eat. There's things to enjoy. So what does God say? Go, eat your bread with pleasure. Don't feel guilty about it. Eat your bread with pleasure and drink your wine with a merry heart. And then this was fascinating. For God has already accepted your works. Now, if you look at this has caused commentators super problems. Let me bring up my Bible works here, because if you don't understand what's going on here, then it sounds like whatever you do, whatever you want to do, God's happy with it. You go out and do whatever you dang want to, and God's going to be really happy with it. And of course, we know that isn't true, but the commentators, the translators are afraid that somebody's going to misunderstand that. And so, of course, I clicked on the wrong button. Hold on just a second. I will absolutely get this up. So this is what, 9:7. Let's go to 7. Like the New American Bible, because it is now that God favors your works. Let's see, the NIV, it is now that God favors what you do. Let's see. But that's the kind of thing that happens. In other words, basically, what happens is the actual Hebrew text, which says that God has already accepted your works, made translators nervous, because they think that people are going to grab a hold of that, just do whatever they want to, and say, well, yeah, but the Bible said that no matter what I do, God's already accepted it. But we've got to understand this in the context. What's the context? Verse 7, go, eat your bread with pleasure and drink your wine with a merry heart. In other words, the works that God has accepted is that you can eat and drink in total enjoyment with pleasure, with a merry heart, and without any guilt. And eat and drink obviously has more than just literal figurative, literal eating and drinking. It means just enjoy your life, like you said earlier. And why does it say God has already accepted your works? In that context, God has already stated that those are the kind of works he wants you to do. Remember chapter 8, I recommend eating and drinking with a merry heart. so if you eat and drink, you don't have to go to God and say, is this okay? Are you sure this okay? I'm having a second helping. Is that all right? I mean, like, that's okay. Isn't it? That isn't gluttony, is it? God's like, I've already told you, eat and drink with a merry heart. I've already accepted those works. And that's what he's getting at here. And again, and as Christian ministers, these verses give us such an opportunity to minister to people, because some of the people we minister to are ascetics, and they feel like it's pleasing God to deny yourself. Some of the people we minister to are guilt-ridden, and they just can't accept that God would like them to be happy. And so they're guilt-ridden on the inside. And verses like we've read out of chapter 8 and here out of chapter 9 they're like super ammunition for us. They're like the sword of the Spirit that allow us to go in and minister healing to people that are afraid, that are guilt-ridden, that have wrong doctrine, that they can't enjoy life. You can't whistle on the Sabbath, for God's sake, that kind of thing. And then verse 8, let your garments be always white. And white, of course, is purity, but it means your garments are clean. Don't chance on the tide. Clean yourself up, for Pete's sake. You need a new pair, you need a new outfit, go buy one. Clean yourself up. Let your and you got to remember that, see, like, for example, if they would make a new coat or a new garment out of linen or flax or wool, it would always be as clean then. That's about as clean as it would ever be. And then he says, the next part, and do not let oil be lacking from your head. Oil is expensive, but also in the biblical culture, because of the intense sun, the oil would be good for your skin, and it would help protect your skin and bless your skin. And what's God say? Don't chance on the dang oil. Gosh, go ahead and enjoy life. And then verse 9, enjoy life with the wife whom you have loved. And I like this because the Hebrew text is in the perfect. It's not necessarily saying you're in a great marriage now. Bill and I talked about this for a while, and I thought it was very powerful. When you first got married, there was that great intense love there, and sometimes that wears off. And then you back off on enjoying life with your partner, your spouse. And God encourages, do you remember that time? Do you remember that love? Do you remember that intensity? Enjoy life with the wife whom you have loved all the days of your pointless life that he's given you under the sun, and I just go enjoy life with your pointless life. He's not trying to blow smoke here and tell you that your life is so dang important. He's just saying, go have a good time that he's given you under the sun. And here he repeats the word pointless twice in the same verse. Your pointless life that he's given you all the days of pointlessness. For that's your portion. Eat, drink, let your clothes be white, enjoy oil, enjoy your beloved. That's your labor. And then verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. Why? Because there isn't any work or planning or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol where you're going. And so you've got to enjoy life now. And that's really where I want to leave us. That's kind of the lesson for tonight. I know it's a little early and we can talk, but I really think that this is something that so many times we get trapped on, because there's just this thing in Christianity. It's almost like God doesn't want us happy. And geez, if you're in the Greek or Russian Orthodox Church and you look at the way the saints are painted on the walls, heaven forbid any of them should have a smile. They all look like their dog just died a couple hours ago. It's really true. And it's just, and there's just that feeling in the church. So I want to leave us with that, and launch us in the conversation from here, because it's meant a lot to me since Bill and I we translated it. We started it last week, and finished this section yesterday. And ever since last week and over the weekend, I've been mulling this over, and it's meant a lot to me. And I trust in the days ahead, it'll mean a lot to you if you go back over and read over it and kind of get it in your soul. But more than happy to kick around conversation at this point.